Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. It is pre-match build-up showtime for the biggest and most difficult game of Liverpool's season, and a game that could potentially decide the fate of the Premier League title come the end of the season in May. And I think it's such a massive game, not just in terms of the simple points of the matter, not just in terms of the gap we're trying to open up on the teams behind us, but also in terms of, and it's something I've spoken about in a lot of videos throughout December, the psychological blow that it delivers to our rivals, because all the way through December, everyone will have been waiting for Liverpool to slip up at some point, especially once we took the lead, once we became the first place team, the team to beat. Everyone will be thinking, at what point do Liverpool drop points, and do they recover from that, or do they fall away? And of course, countless Liverpool failures of the past, like the Champions League final and the Europa League final, and of course the ill-fated title challenger 2013-14 will always be on people's minds. People will have been thinking at some point everything goes wrong for Liverpool, and if it's ever going to happen between now and the end of the season, it's going to be tomorrow night at the Etihad, because like I said, it is the most difficult game of the season. They're still potentially the most difficult team to play, certainly in terms of how hard you have to work to get a result against them over 90 minutes, if not maybe, how difficult it is to actually get a result in the first place, because at the moment, Liverpool seem just far more consistent in terms of how they just constantly win games. But they are a really difficult team to play, and especially with it being away from home as well, there's not going to be a better opportunity for Liverpool to slip up and other teams to try and catch up than on Thursday night. So it's a huge game, and like I said, it's as much about that psychological blow to our rivals as it is simply about keeping up that gap on Spurs, and of course expanding the gap to, what would it be, 10 points over Manchester City, which would be absolutely incredible, and then maybe even end their title challenge already in January. So a little bit about what Jurgen Klopp's been saying going into the game. One thing that I think will encourage a lot of people is the fact that he said we will just play our normal game, regardless of all the scenarios around points that we could make up on our rivals. We're just going to go through and play the Liverpool way. And to be honest, I think that's probably the best thing, because I think so far the taking it game by game approach has worked pretty well. And I think some people maybe see it as a cliche and think, it's all just made up so that players don't say anything that comes back to bite them in a few weeks' time. But I think it is what Liverpool are simply doing, because if you obsess over the fact that we need like 105 points or something like that to win the league, you'll just go mad, because you need to get so many wins to actually get that kind of points total that we're going to need. So there isn't really any other way to try and win this league without losing your mind completely than to literally just take it game by game. So I think that's the best approach. And to be honest, I think that's exactly what Liverpool are doing. And it's a very, very good thing for this game at the Etihad. So team news going into the game. James Milner is the only player who's really up in the air in terms of fitness for this game. Certainly out of players that you think would stand a chance of actually playing any sort of role in the starting 11. He is back after the back injury that kept him out over the last couple of games. So that is, of course, a boost. I mean, midfield is probably the place we've rotated the most. So the place you don't really look at and think we're going to need to maybe bring some players out, rest a few players here and there. It's probably where we're going to be freshest, which is obviously ideal, because that, I think, is where the game is won and lost. Certainly because the style of how we play in midfield and the style of how City play in midfield is so different. Elsewhere on the pitch, we're very similar. We like to play it out from the back. We like the bombing on full-backs. We like having the intricate one-touch play between the attacking players. But when it comes to midfield, we're so much more physical. We love the press. We love a bit of a battle. We love putting the tackles in, and that is just not how they play. So it's going to be really interesting how that turns out. Apart from that, no other real team news. I mean, Moreno's back in contention. I think Lallana had a little bit of a knock that was sort of keeping him out from playing any huge role in the games. But apart from that, nothing that's really got anyone either jumping for joy or weeping into their roast dinners and stuff like that. So as for the starting 11 for the game, I think it's going to be Alisson Becker in goal. Not even going to talk about it. It's obvious. The centre-back pairing, again, it's a little bit obvious. It is, of course, going to be Dejan Lovren and Virgil van Dijk. I think we'd all rather it was Joe Gomez alongside Virgil, especially because we haven't really seen Joe Gomez play alongside Virgil van Dijk in too many big games so far this season, and we want to see how a centre-back who is as young as Joe Gomez and as relatively inexperienced as him fares in these kind of matches. But of course, Lovren and Van Dijk, it's a very solid partnership. It's the partnership that played in that Champions League tie and also in the 0-0 draw with them at Anfield earlier on the season, so I wouldn't worry about that at all. The fullbacks, again, no real argument there. It's got to be Trent. It's got to be Andrew Robertson. Again, I think rotation doesn't really come into consideration for this game, especially with the fact that there was a 5-day gap even between this and the game against Arsenal. And then again, the game after this is the one against Wolves in the FA Cup, which is where I think we'll see a lot more rotation. I think most of the players who play tomorrow night won't play against Wolves, so we don't really need to worry about that sort of thing. In the midfield, I think we have to go with the 4-3-3. I think the way that the game sets itself up, the dynamic that we're expecting and the kind of balance of play that everyone foresees with how we're going to play against City, I think you've got to go with the midfield three. And I think... and this will get on a lot of people's nerves, and I think the lineup when it comes out could wind a lot of people up. I think it's going to be the good old-fashioned workman-like midfield of Jordan Henderson at the base, and then Gini Van Aldum and James Milner further forward. I think we'll probably see Fabinho at some point. We might see Keita at some point if we need to bring in a bit of attacking flair. But I think that midfield three really works when we just want to sit back a little bit and then let the front three do their thing. And I think with how City are going to play, and I'll come on to that a bit more in a moment, I think that midfield three is the best for how we want to set up and how we want to counteract the way that City are going to approach this game. And then, of course, the front three has to be Mohamed Salah down the right, Firmino down the middle, and Sadio Mane down the left. Now, obviously, this can all change. It can be very fluid. Salah will probably look to come inside a lot because that's where he's been playing his best football recently. And I wouldn't be surprised if we did bring a Naby Keita in and sort of play kind of the 4-2-3-1 that we played against Man United at home, just to facilitate playing Mohamed Salah in that number 9 role, where he has been really, really good this season. But I think the benefit of how we play at the moment, and like I said, as I've said in many videos, how we've played multiple systems, is that no player is sort of rigid in one position on the pitch. They can move around, they can play a different role, they can manage their way through games as well. So if it's not going well, if we do go 1-0 down or we're struggling to break City down, we can switch it up, and that doesn't always involve changes in personnel. But I also think with that lineup, you've got great options off the bench. You can bring on Sturridge if you need a goal, you can bring on Fabinho if you need to tighten it up, Keita if you need to link up the midfield and attack. Bit similar with Xherdan Shaqiri, obviously offers goals as well and a little bit of formation change. So I think Liverpool are in a really, really good position with this game, and I think that's the lineup we're going to go with. I think Salah, Firmino and Mane is the front three, and then keeping players like Shaqiri and Sturridge sort of on the back burner, ready to see if we need to change it at some point. So taking a look at Manchester City then, I think I've said a little bit already how I think the dynamic of this game sort of plays into our hands, and I think the reason that that is the case is this game is a much bigger game for Manchester City than it is for Liverpool. This is essentially a save our season match for them, because at the moment, 7 points behind Liverpool, they will have had this game earmarked as their moment to actually take advantage and put a little bit of pressure on Liverpool. You know, if they not only beat us, if they make up that sort of that gap and make it 4 points rather than 7, and also just put a little bit of pressure on us, because we haven't lost a game yet this season. We haven't had to see Liverpool respond to a loss in the league yet. And I think Manchester City will be thinking about what happened to them after they lost against Chelsea, and think if they can do a similar thing to us, then they can put themselves right back in the mixer for the title race. So this is absolutely massive for them. I think they have to win. A draw just isn't good enough for them, and they won't have been anticipating that earlier on the season. I think what's really interesting is the way Man City set up for that 0-0 at Anfield. I think that was Pep Guardiola finally working out a way to deal with Jurgen Klopp's system, finally working out how to go out against a Jurgen Klopp side and not get absolutely battered, because it's a problem that's tormented him for a while. Even in Germany, Jurgen Klopp was just the fly in the ointment that would not go away, and I think he was probably quite pleased with that game at Anfield, even though it wasn't the City way. They didn't attack like he would have wanted them to do. For them to get a point out of that and a clean sheet, he will have been chuffed with that. And he'll be so annoyed that he just can't use that system again. There's no way he can go out at the Etihad and set them up for a point, set them up to defend, and maybe get a couple of chances on the counter-attack. Because to be honest, City didn't really counter-attack that well in that game. And some of that's down to how good Liverpool are as well. You know, with Van Dijk, with Lovren, with Alisson Becker as well. They've got to do more than just create a couple of half chances to actually get through our defence. So I think Pep Guardiola will be really irritated with that, because that means he plays into our hands. We will want to be able to go into this game and not necessarily sit back, but wait for our moments, wait for when we have to strike. It's what worked in the Champions League. We scored 5 goals basically from letting Man City come out, letting them create the space themselves, and then hitting them on the break. So in terms of their team news, I think it's incredibly interesting what's been going on with Manchester City and the injuries that their players have sustained recently. Kevin De Bruyne is almost definitely going to miss out this game. It's been very much up in the air, and no one really knows how fit Man City's players are, because they'll always say like, oh, De Bruyne's going to be out for 6 weeks, and then he comes back within a fortnight or something ridiculous like that. And I do think there's been a lot of pressure on Pep Guardiola so far this season, and I almost feel like he is rushing players back out of a sort of panic to try and compensate for the fact that Liverpool are ahead of him in the league, and he does have to put a little bit more effort into trying to get a result every single week. I think last season, if De Bruyne had had the injuries he'd had this season, he would have had a proper layoff, a proper rest, and he would have come back absolutely fine. Whereas this season, he's already had like 3 injuries or something like that have kept him out for multiple weeks at a time. So I do think the fact that he's trying to overcompensate for Liverpool's fantastic form at the moment has meant that City's players are never quite fully fit, and especially around this time of year as well. You've got to rotate, you've got to manage the players well. So far, Jurgen Klopp's been very good at that. Obviously, it could all unravel in this game, and this could suddenly be a game too far. But it does seem like he's been very careful in terms of handling players' fitness and making sure that no one is ever sort of pushed past their limits or anything like that. And I just feel like it's a totally different story at Manchester City. The speed with which they brought Fernandinho back, I think everyone was expecting a couple more weeks before he returned. He was even considered a doubt for this game, let alone the one which he actually played in at St Mary's. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how Man City play. I think obviously they're going to have to come out and attack, but whether they've got the energy for that, whether their players are fit enough to adopt a system like that is a totally different matter. So I do think this is going to be a fantastic game. I don't think it's going to be easy. Like I said, the tactical battle, it does play into our hands. We could come away and win 3-0, but it's Manchester City, and no matter what form they're in, we saw it against Southampton last time out. They weren't playing well. They were actually pretty poor, and yet at one point in the game, they just turned it on, and suddenly they were 3-1 up, and the game was over before half-time. They're still a fantastic side. They've still got great players. They've got Aguero there as well, who, you know, he's fit for this game, so he's almost definitely going to score, because when doesn't he score against Liverpool at the Etihad when he plays? So it's going to be a tough match. To be honest, it's one of the few games where I'd actually take a draw, because not only would that be a good result in terms of how good the opposition is, it'd also be a good result in terms of the fact that I think that keeps us 6 points clear. Actually, no, 7 points clear, because it would put us 1 point ahead of where we already are relative to Spurs' position as well. So I'd take a draw. I'd back Liverpool to win, but there is, of course, every chance that we could lose. So it is an absolutely fantastic game. It's the kind of games you live for. It's the kind of games we've been desperate for so long. We've been desperate to be part in a title race, to have games like this in January that mean so much. And it is going to be incredible. It's hopefully going to be a great game. It's hopefully going to be nothing like the drab, boring 0-0 at Anfield earlier on this season. And hopefully Liverpool get the 3 points that could just, fingers crossed, wrap up the title race in January. So that is all for today's video. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, do all the usual stuff. Hit the like button down there. Hit that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days as well. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back tomorrow evening after we've hopefully battered City at the Etihad. Until then, bye for now.